Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Nathan. Thank you so much, Tribal Warrior, for the dance. I travel all over the world, and I have to really commend Australian hospitality. Usually I say African hospitality is unmatched all over the world. Australia is a close second. So thank you so much. I've been here a few days, and James' team have been very hospitable, and everyone has been lovely, and I'm so happy and proud to be here. It's when you come from a country that was colonized by the Brits, when you come to another country that was also colonized by the Brits, everything is familiar. So so thank you so much. Yeah, everything. This feels like home in a weird way. So as you've heard, I'm a teacher. I wanted first of all to just thank my survivor community. I especially those ones who are in the room. I stand here because most of the time I'm sent by my community, and I acknowledge that. And I've been lucky to meet some here, and I'm excited to meet more. My keynote is going to focus on a few things, and one of them is the intersectional nature of modern slavery and why it's important. This is also an invitation to all of us. I'm preaching to the choir, but yes, because all of us are here because we are concerned about this issue. But I believe that part of what James' team has said is that we need to shift the narrative. And I truly hope that as we have this discussion or as we continue talking, we understand why it's important for the narratives to shift. Congratulations to James' team. This takes hard work to put together something like this. And also thank you so much for putting survivors at the center. It's not something that is normally done. So when it's done, it has to be commended. According to the most recent Global Slavery Index produced by our friends at the ILO and Walk Free, the number is 50 million who are trapped in modern slavery. This number has increased. And since the last estimate, and we all need to be concerned that the number is increasing. There are many reasons why it's increased. Some people say it's because we've become better at counting. But some of us who come from impacted communities know that this issue has always been with us. We talk about it as modern, but for impacted communities, this issue is not modern. This issue has always been with us. So even as we speak about this issue as being modern, we need to recognize that for impacted communities, abuse, exploitation, exclusion has always been a part of us. The economy, globally as we know it, has been built on the back of slaves. And as humanity, we need to recognize that the ways in which we produce, the ways in which we live, the ways in which we have relationships with each other cannot continue to be built on the backs of people. The past 3 years have been hard as a result of the pandemic. There's been an enormous impact on local economies, pushing more people to take jobs in higher risk industry or to migrate across borders. Simultaneously, we recognize that the pandemic isolated people and gave traffickers more of an opportunity to recruit victims online. Climate change has had a more drastic effect, pushing many people into economic insecurity, forcing them to migrate or otherwise disrupting their lives. We see shifting demand for new products, and old industries continue to say they're reforming, and we don't see that reform. We cannot, impacted communities and people we cannot ignore the fact that there's a global shift away from democracy, which has led to weakening of protections from labor abuses and enforcement of existing laws. If you are a woman in this room or you come from a marginalized community, you recognize that also protections for women and girls around the world is shifting. And and the old inequalities built by poverty, gender inequality, colonialism, none of that has gone away. I'm not saying that it's damning, but the reality is that this issue is only going to get worse. And most of this issue, this crowd is familiar with. I bring this up to illustrate an important point that many well-intentioned people miss. Modern slavery is not a standalone problem that can be solved, unfortunately, with specific laws. It is a deeply complex problem that is both cause and effect of the greatest challenges we face in society and which sits at the intersection of all of them. As such, what we need to really confront modern slavery is not policy alone. The solution will not come from government alone. The solution will not come from corporates, but will come if all of us come together and create a mass movement. I'm glad that this is an issue that both sides of the opposition and government believe that it's something we need to work on. So our mass movement is not something that we cannot create. It's something that is possible. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is my work, of course, at the Global Fund. One of the things that has been significantly happening in this space is a conversation around meaningful engagement of survivors. And the fact that we've built a system that intentionally excludes impacted communities. The system that we've created in the past 20 years does not speak the language of survivors, does not have policies that recognize the realities of what survivors go through, and above all, leaves us consistently as beneficiaries rather than people that can develop solutions. I took over as CEO of the Global Fund last year in March. And the fund was started in 2016 with the lofty goal of ending modern slavery. I can successfully tell you that we've shifted that lofty goal. I'm a jaded activist. I do not believe that we are going to end modern slavery in my lifetime. But I genuinely believe that we can be able to do something to head in that direction. We started with funding. The fund started with funding, as you've heard, from the US, the UK, and Norway. And with the funding, 40 programs in the Philippines, Vietnam, India, Bangladesh, Kenya, Uganda, and Brazil were funded. And these programs were successful, significantly successful. We developed promising new tech tools, we funded reintegration services, and we conducted cutting-edge research, including prevalence studies in places where no good estimates existed. However, like everybody else in the field, we always felt that our greatest impact was in work we could never truly focus on due to the nature of the funding that we got. And secondly, we recognized that we made a huge mistake. And that mistake was that we came in as experts and did not speak to the experts we did not speak to the experts the way we were supposed to speak to, and those experts are impacted communities. So it's no secret that results are better when survivors and impacted communities are included. But this is not, as I said, it's not always done, and when it's not done intentionally. The way conventional funding works makes things challenging for small organizations in many ways. If you come from a small organization, you know what this means. So project-based funding forces small organizations to hire and lay off team members on project basis, limiting their ability to build on past experience and pushing them into a constant cycle of recruiting. It is quite sad to me that we talk about modern slavery, we talk about labor practices as a space, especially civil society. But when you look at the practices within our own organizations, they do not reflect the dream that we are trying to sell to everyone. And part of my activism is that if we are going to teach people about labor, those of us who are speaking about this really need to walk the talk. We really need to walk the talk. The burnout rate, I've lost so many friends as a result of burnout, as a result of trauma, as a result of stress, because the work conditions in civil society and all the activists in the room I know can say it's not easy. Yet we consistently stand on platforms like this and call out corporates on their labor practices. I think that it's highly hypocritical if we cannot have the same standards in the organizations that we work. That is why when I took over at the Global Fund, one of the first things that I did was to shift our strategy, as I said. I've not always been CEO of the board of the fund, and it's it's been interesting to go on a journey of internal change, and I welcome most of the organizations in the room that want to do this. It's a reflection. I've said this before. If you work for an organization that works with impacted communities, one of the things you need to ask yourself is, what would it take for one of your beneficiaries to lead the organization? What would it take? Note down what it would take, start doing that work, because that's the work that is needed. I worked for a decade, so I've worked in the space for more than 20 years. I've worked in development for 20 years. And before I joined the space, I was an expert on different things. As soon as I joined the counter-trafficking space, I said I was a survivor advocate. And what happened is that I was stigmatized, I was excluded, and in many cases, people completely assumed that as a result of my experience, I was not an expert. It's a huge problem. It's a significant, if you live with anything, you can forget everything I say. But please remember that just because someone says they're a survivor, you know nothing about them. And it doesn't say anything about their capacity. It doesn't say anything about what they are doing. It's important also to note that survivors have different stories. There isn't one survivor narrative. There are multiple survivor narratives that need to be accepted, that need to be included, and we need to expand our imagination of that. For most of us, well-meaningly, we have said we treat survivors as beneficiaries, and some of us don't want to be taken care of. I know that that comes as a surprise, but survivors don't always want to be in a room where they're being taken care of or consistently being protected. It is very paternalistic, the way we've consistently used trauma to exclude survivors in decision-making processes. The assumption that because of my trauma, I cannot design programs, cannot read an Excel budget, and cannot design a strategy is really deeply condescending. The importance of survivors leading this movement cannot really be underestimated. And my hope is that as we leave this room, we come to a central consensus that the anti-slavery movement in general or sector is better off if all of us center impacted communities. Abuse starts when people have power over other people. And right now, I hope that next time I come to this space, we'll have greater representation of people with lived experience that can be able to speak up. So I also welcome you to partner with the fund. We are shifting, as I said, we are shifting our strategy with a focus on 3 aims: building a lived experience-centered movement, as you can think, and then funding the movement, and the last is supporting advocacy. My hope is that I continue seeing survivor-led organizations supported with capacity and with the tools that they need to grow. My hope is that organizations will take advantage. As I said, last year we worked on a meaningful engagement toolkit. You can look at it on our website, because many organizations, when we say work with survivors, say how. We don't know. There are tools, and we developed an active tool that you can use to assess your organization as far as where you are, as far as including impacted communities is, with suggestions on what you should do. We are working on building a database of survivor consultants all over the world. And if you do not have someone, as a person with lived experience that can be able to advise you, you can also reach out to us. We will connect you to people that will be able to support your organization to move in that direction. We are not here to judge, we are here to learn, we are here to fund. Inclusion has to be funded. I cannot say that enough. If we want people with lived experience in rooms, we are going to have to spend a little bit more. That's just the truth. There's no way to run. We are going to have to run a little bit slower. But that doesn't mean that we are not efficient. So I have shared this, and now I want to wish James and the team. Thank you so much, James. I've worked with James over the years in the different capacities that he's been working, and I'm really excited about what they've shared. I'm glad that they're centering survivors. I'm glad that meaningful engagement of survivors is at the core of this strategy. As I said, it's not something that is obvious. It should be obvious. I give this example all the time. Imagine if the women's rights movement had men leading it. The outcry, right? That's what we feel, those of us who have lived experience in these rooms. It's not to say that the people without lived experience do not have a role to play. That's why for me, the call of a mass movement is so important, because with a mass movement, all of us have a role to play, but the people who are most impacted are the ones that are centered, which should always, always be the key. I wanted to end with a quote from a friend of mine who's also a survivor leader called Chris Ash. And they wrote this in the morning today, and I thought it was appropriate. You cannot authentically participate in the empowerment of someone you pity. You cannot. I know most impacted communities do not want your pity, and pity is not empowerment. It really isn't empowerment. If we are to have a critical conversation of solutions, we really need to stop pitying people and really start talking about what true empowerment looks like, that is embodied in dignity. And the organization I lead, GFEMS, is going to be at the core of working with all of you to design that and to think about that. Thank you so much.